Welcome guys again for part 3 of this PC spec series, and we are going to discover more about the last episode of this part 3 series, and we are going to discuss about specs versus real usage. You have upgraded your machine, you have upgraded your RAM to 16 to 32 GB, yet you still feel your machine is still slow, or you have upgraded your storage maybe from 256 GB to 512 to 1 TB to 2 TB, yet you're still feeling your machine slow. You have done everything to ensure your machine is running fast, but running fast doesn't equate to contextual performance of machine. What do I mean by this? So we understand that specs alone do not guarantee performance. You see, the myth is people think that if you have more RAM, if you have a big SSD and higher CPU is equal to better performance. But the reality is performance depends on usage, in which case a laptop must match what you actually do. So let's say for designers who are using Photoshop, Illustrator, or those who are using Canva, those who are using, Affinity apps, all of those. Or for people who are doing video editing, Premiere Pro, DaVinci, Resolve. Or for the Mac users who are using Final Cut. And then there are those people who do basic tasks, browsing, typing, and video conferencing. So each of those users, each of those 3 users that I've mentioned, they require a different kind of machine. So like I mentioned before, it can never be one shoe fits everyone. Every person has the shoe that fits them based on their career. And then the other thing I'd like to highlight is, in terms of reality, you find that if you might have 16 GB of RAM, you might have whatever the SSD you have, 512 or 1 TB of SSD or Core i7, but still experience lag. Have you ever asked yourself why? So one of the reasons as to why you may experience that lag include the following. There is the old CPU generation. So let's say your CPU is old. Remember, your CPU has what we call instruction set. So there's times 86, and there's what we call ARM. Times 86 is the one that usually uses the AMD, the Intel. They use the time 86. The ARM is for mostly like this, the MacBooks and even our phones. So you find that if you have an old CPU, you find that it tends to lag in terms of the way it computes instructions and the way it processes data. You remember your CPU is like the brain. So the older it is, the harder it is to configure some of those instructions based on the apps you are using in 2026. Let me use a case example of my laptop right behind me. So this laptop of mine is a Broadwell, that generation of Broadwell CPUs, the Intel CPUs, back then 2014, 15, around there. So you find that the instructions that it's using, the kind of instruction it's using, especially if I'm opening maybe latest Photoshop, of which I don't have the latest Photoshop because it can't process that Photoshop. It can't run. It will just open and just crash. You find that because of that reason, it is limited to the kind of softwares you have either updated or installed, especially any modern software. Then the other thing I'd like to talk about is poor optimization. So sometimes if you are playing a game and you don't optimize your settings, let's say you have upgraded your RAM on your desktop. Either you have upgraded your DDR5 RAM. So sometimes you might want to play a game, but then you find your games are running at the lowest tier kind of speed. So you find that you didn't optimize it when you are either setting up when you are launching, when you are getting into BIOS, there's some configuration you need to set it up for that piece of hardware to run well. Like, case an example, the DDR5. So you find that instead of running at a certain frequency, it is running at the lowest frequency, the recommended frequency. So you end up asking yourself, I have a 32 GB DDR5 RAM on my desktop, but why do I feel it's lagging slow? It's because you didn't optimize it well in the default settings in the BIOS. Same case as any other components that you may have. And then the third thing I'd like to discuss is heavy software demands. So I used a case, an example of Photoshop 2026 versus my nearly 10-year-old laptop right behind me. It's nearly 10. It's almost 10 because it was bought at around July 2016. So you find if I'm running Photoshop 2026, it demands a lot, especially on CPU, the GPU, and the RAM. So you find if your hardware configuration was set to apps between 2016 to as late as 2020, you will find that some of those softwares you are running cannot run well, and most end up crashing because of that old hardware. The biggest lie, let me discuss the biggest lie. The biggest lie most people tell themselves, more specs, better performance. People always assume that if you have more RAM, it is fast. If you have i7, it is really powerful. If you have a large storage, let's say 1 or 2 TB of SSD, it's powerful. It is not true, because specs don't tell full story. Context does. Context, I mean the things that the hardware is running the kind of software on your machine. So let's say it's Photoshop 2026. You might have an i7, but that doesn't mean that every i7 is optimized to run that latest Photoshop you have, or DaVinci Resolve, or any other program that you may be running in your machine. Thinking i7 is really powerful, it will run it. That's not all. So context does, not the specs. And then people who think old i7, or let me use like 5th gen versus new 12th gen, they may think the old is running well, but they don't know the kind of design in that processor is totally different from the older processor. And this is why, if I compare this i5 of mine right behind me and the i5 maybe of another similar series like that Lenovo, maybe I'd put it in the category of IdeaPads or ThinkPads, you will find that the latest ThinkPad CPU is powerful more than the one right behind me. Then the other thing I'd like to discuss is the reason as to why the newer machines run really well is because they have a better architecture. Remember, I mentioned x86 and ARM. So those are the kind of instruction set those CPUs are designed to run. Then they have more cores and they have better efficiencies. So I will discuss more about the cores efficiency in a later video. And then you find that an old i7 is not better than a new i5. Generation matters. And this is why you find there is the 8th generation, 9th generation, 10th generation, 11th generation, 12th generation, 13th generation, 14, and currently 15, almost transitioning into 16 by late this year. If I'm correct, I'm not very sure, but around somewhere at the end of the year. So you find that really matters a lot. Usage defines performance. You see, if you're using your laptop for basic use, it doesn't need high specs. In terms of those of you who are doing graphic design, they need good RAM and good display. For video editing, they need good CPU, GPU, and cooling. If a mismatch happens when you are having any of those, your system will always struggle, and most of the time you will tend to blame the laptop instead of understanding the kind of usage you are using. So the underlying fact is a laptop is only as good as how well it matches your work. And then secondly, I'd like to discuss about software demands. So software demands keep increasing. You see, newer versions of apps, they tend to be heavier. And updates tend to equate to more resources usage. That's why a laptop that worked well before that worked well before can start slowing down. So I use a case and example of Photoshop or even After Effects or Premiere Pro. So the latest updates you will always experience that slowdown in terms of performance because of the new features. And it impacts in other ways like optimization. So you have cases of two laptops. They have same specs but different performance. So why? There is what we call the cooling system, software optimization, and background processes. A well-optimized system beats a powerful but poorly managed one. So you see, you might have updated the softwares, but in the end, if it is poorly optimized, even a low-performing machine can outperform a better one because it has been optimized properly, beating the one that is what people might say it is either spec rich. You see, you have to configure well your machine. Like I said before, there is what we call optimization when you are getting into BIOS. Let's say like the RAM and every other component, especially the RAM. If you just upgraded your RAM and accidentally you just use your app without using the XMP mode, whether you are gaming or doing anything, so chances are you'll experience that slowdown because you did not configure it during the BIOS of the motherboard that you have. And then the other thing, guys, I'd like to finalize is, in as much as we want to get that feature-rich laptop, let's say you were targeting a gaming laptop, let's say you are targeting maybe that nice desktop, a power station, kind of desktop, or a workstation kind of desktop, not power station. Power station is a different one. A workstation kind of desktop. So you see, some of these things you have to know them, understand how to configure them to get the best out of your purchase. So let's say you upgraded to your DDR5, maybe you upgraded from 16 to 32 or 32 to 64. So you need to configure some of those settings in the BIOS to understand if they are good. And then understand the kind of use you're going to use on that machine. If you are going to use it for either coding or design or desktop use, let's say like typing document, Excels, Word, Acrobat, PDFs, and Zoom browsing, understand your niche so that you buy right. To conclude this series, it's all about getting right for your usage. Don't buy because you have the money. It's good to have money, but money is as useful as where it is invested in. So if you invest in the right hardware, you get good returns in terms of value. With the latest softwares, with the latest features that are continually being churned by your software provider, whether it's Adobe, whether it's DaVinci, whether it's Microsoft, whether it's gaming, or whatever the case. Understanding some of these things will ensure that you have a better understanding on what you need to choose for your productivity. If you have questions, if you have anything to ask based on this series, feel free to comment down below, and see you in the new series as updated within my channel. So just check it out, just follow me, and feel free to comment or talk about anything and see you. Bye bye.